Yes. Yes, you should be able to share your screen.
Okay. So I would like to talk to you about my travel in Sri Lanka, which I did in January and February of last year. And just for your information, when I go on my travels, I don't use any travel agency or organize tours. I organize my travel myself, and I stay in guest houses, travel via trains, buses, or I hire uh, taxis and travel that way. So, as I say, just to frame where Sri Lanka is, as you can see, it's in the Indian Ocean, uh, Bay of Bengal. It's about 21 miles from India. The area is about 5 times bigger than Connecticut. It's about the same size as West Virginia. However, as every other country in Asia, population is much, much higher. Almost 23 million people compared to 3.7 in Connecticut, 1.8 in Virginia. So what's interesting about this country is that it's not the population, it's not uniform. It's about 75% are Sinhalese, which are Buddhists. Then you have two groups of Tamils, Sri Lankan Tamils, that came from India years ago, Sri Lankan Moors, which are Muslims, Indian Tamils, that's the second group of Tamils. These Tamils were brought to Sri Lanka by British, and then other half a percent. And you can see religion more or less follows the Sinhalese. Those are Buddhists. Tamils are Hindu. Moors are Muslims. And there is quite a sizable population of Christians, almost 8%. Right now, they have two official languages, which is Sinhalese and Tamil. And you can see the concentration where the Tamils are red areas, the Muslims green. Of course, this fuchsia is Sinhalese, and then Indian Tamils brought by British. They were brought to work on the tea plantations. So tea plantations, you can see where they are concentrated in the middle. So when I travel, I'm not only interested in nice views and nice hotels. I would like to, before I travel, I would like to learn a little bit about history and political situation and so on. So when I went there in 2019, it was 10 years after civil war in Sri Lanka ended. It ended in 2009. So in my opinion, it was quite safe. They didn't have any terrorist attacks and so on. And unfortunately, after I came back a few months later during the Easter holidays, there was terrible attack where quite a few people were killed. So let's talk about history. History of this country goes way back, about 6th century before Christ, BC, and first colonists came from India, and of course they were Hindu, but as you know, Buddhism developed in India. The Buddhism was started spreading throughout the world and was introduced in Sri Lanka in 250 BC. Just for question, do you know what was the name before they changed to Sri Lanka? What was the name? It was Ceylon, right? So I'm assuming that everybody knows that. Of course, with time, the kingdoms developed, and the first one was here in this Anandapura, in this town, and then, as in many countries in history, it was moved to different locations. The last king that was in Sri Lanka was abolished by British in about 1815. Okay, colonization. This is interesting fact that I found. Colonization of Sri Lanka started with Portuguese, and when you travel through Asia, you find many different countries where Portuguese were first colonizers, and then all these European colonial powers, which was Portugal, Dutch, Holland, or Spaniards, they competed with amongst themselves quite fiercely. So in case of Sri Lanka, this is very good example. First were Portuguese, they colonized coastal areas. Then they were pushed out by Dutch, and Dutch were in Sri Lanka from 17th to 19th century, and then of course Brits came and displaced the Dutch. So Ceylon at that time, as it was called, got in under British rule in 1815 totally, and I mean totally is because when Portuguese and Dutch were colonizing Sri Lanka, they really stayed around the coastal areas, and the middle of the country was still ruled by Sri Lankan native king. When Brits came, they would not tolerate independent country there and king or whatever. So they abolished king, deposed him, and started to spread throughout the whole island. So after Second World War in 1948, Sri Lanka gained independence, and when I say gain independence, it became dominion. It was still part of British Empire, but and they recognize British Queen as a head of government, but they had their self-rule. However, in 1972, they renounced the dominion status and called the full independence. Okay, so as with any independence movement, what is, you know, we can see that through many different countries that are gaining independence. Initially, there is one bad, goal to gain independence. So all the fractions, political fractions in the country unite to get this independence. And that's how it happened in Sri Lanka in 1948, when they gained independence. Government was created by Buddhists and Tamils and Muslims. It was kind of unity government. However, as years passed by, the whole thing started unraveling, and Sinhalese, who are majority in the country, they gain control of the government, and this SWRD Bandaranaike was elected prime minister in 1956. This was purely Sinhalese majority government. And what happened? Something happened which is kind of opposite to what happened after 60s in 1960s in the United States. The affirmative action started. However, affirmative action was not directed toward minorities, but toward majority, toward Sinhalese. So this Prime Minister Bandaranaike, he declared that Sinhalese culture and language was under attack, and they were going to lose lots of it. And he declared that Sinhalese should be the only official language, and the culture, Sinhalese culture, should be only official culture of the country. Of course, that disenfranchised the minorities, the Tamils, the Muslims, Christians, and the trouble started. You cannot. This is the kind of example of having bad politicians. So the unrest in country started, and after the while in 1958, the SWRD Bandaranaike prime minister changed his mind and decided that they're going to recognize minorities and declare the Tamil and Sinhalese language as an official language. However, it was too late, because his electorate became very conservative. And what happened? The Buddhists killed him, and the kind of trouble started. But his wife was still strongly positioned, and she took over the government in 1959. There were few coup attempts, but she prevailed, and at the same, so she started ruling the country, and not only that, she continued this Sinhalese only rule, but she turned into Soviet Union and China for support. So they nationalized lots of industries and started on this path to socialism. That didn't help with the problem of minorities being disenfranchised, and the whole thing started unraveling. And I will address, because through my travels I was visiting some parts that I'm mentioning here in history. So let's go to travel. So my travel started in capital city of Colombo, and this is the largest city, about 6 million population, and financial center, tourist destination, and so on. Here you have after 1948 independence, they built this Independence Hall, which is very, I think, not very elaborate, but it's symbolic, has its symbolic values. Here is the first prime minister who created that government with all the minorities included. The Colombo it's quite nice city. It has the lake almost in the center of the city. Modern buildings and but also has slums. On the periphery. What I found very unusual, lots of traffic, car traffic, motorized rickshaw traffic, very few traffic lights, and very few, when they don't have traffic lights on the intersections, quite often policemen was standing and directing traffic, but there are lots of intersections without policemen even, no traffic lights, no, there are stop signs or whatever, but like in many countries in Asia, road traffic is moving, and for some reason, and it's like total chaos. Nobody is directing. So it was kind of nerve wrenching until we got used to the traffic. Of course, Colombo, that's the Buddhist area, Sinkali located. So here are the examples of two Buddhist temples. One is on this lake, kind of very small and modern looking, and there is another big one. How did I move? So for short distance, we use these tuk-tuks, which are motorized rickshaws, and they were, up to 50 miles. It's possible to move around the country. There, okay. So from we went to National Museum in Colombo, and I found this, which is a stone burial chamber, and it looked very familiar because when I went to Ireland, they had similar burial chambers. So it tells me that the civilization was developing in kind of along the same paths, and they used, of course, local materials to create those, but the idea was very the same. There were lots of children in Sri Lanka. We saw them throughout, and they have strict rules when it comes to uniforms in schools or whatever. So these are, for instance, when we were in a National Museum, the group of school children came also to view some of the exhibitions there, and it was very, very pleasant to the eye to look at them. They were very organized and obeying their teachers. Okay, one thing, okay, so now I was telling you about this last king that was deposed by British in 1815. So while in the National Museum, we saw this portrait of the last king and his throne, and also crown and sword and whatever. So there was explanation that this throne was given to the king as a gift by Dutch, who were colonizing the part of the country, but still they maintained the civil and peaceful relationship with the king. What happened when British came, they not only abolished the king, they took the throne and all the insignia of the king and took it to England, of course. So this tells you about difference in approach that different colonizer had, and of course British returned before Second World War all these things to Sri Lanka, but when you go to London and to British Museum, you see lots of artifacts that were robbed from different countries, from colonies. So after moving around and Colombo, we were ready to go into the middle of the country, and we decided to use this old train, and the last wagon was called this is observation train, just simply by the fact that it had those two big windows. Okay, so and you can see it wasn't air conditioned. This is below the country, below the equator. So when we were there, it was the end of summer. So it was quite hot. So this old train had these fans to get the air moving, and but it was quite a nice ride. And we went, as you can see, from Colombo to Nuwara Eliya, to a town called Nuwara Eliya, which the Sri Lankans say that it's like Little England. And why it was like Little England, the climate, it's a hill country. Climate was very temperate, and lots of tea plantations in that area. You can see all the slopes of these hills covered with the tea plant bushes. Okay, so one of the, and we stayed in the guest house, which was considered like a mountain lodge on the periphery of town. So one day we are walking from this guest house to town, and people were very curious there. They always, when they can recognize tourists, and then they ask, where are you from, and what are you going to see, and so on. And so on one of our walks, we met the old looking guy who started walking with us and asking questions. And he said, in this Novara Elia town, we have Buddhists, we have Hindus, we have Muslims, we have Christians. And he said, and we lived peacefully together until politicians got involved, and they messed up everything. And that was very telling and on point, statement about situation in the country, past and even present. So, of course, when you're in Sri Lanka, you cannot skip the visiting tea plantations, so and tea factories. So here is one of this Damro factory. Leaves are dried, and then here on these tables they are kind of compacted, and little moisture is added, and that's called fermentation, that they are fermenting, and then after that this everything is dried again, and they start sorting. And what we buy in the tea bags, they call that this is tea dust. The most valuable are big pieces of leaves, which are not damaged and whatever. So when you steep your tea, you get the freshest flavor and best flavor, or whatever they put in the tea bags. It's that very broken parts, or even, like they say, it's dust. Surprisingly, Sri Lanka or Ceylon, they produce lots of tea, but they don't have their own brand of tea known throughout the world. So they have kind of the house where they sell in Colombo, where they sell these teas, and all these teas are bought by Liptons and Bigelows and whatever, and these big companies sell Sri Lankan teas really throughout the world. So that was Novara Elia. From there, we traveled to a little town called Ela, and this time we kind of hired the guy with the minivan, and distance wasn't that far, and he took us there. And Ela is a typical tourist town. Lots of restaurants, lots of massage parlors, whatever. But what is the interesting about Ela, that the area around the town is very interesting. So, for instance, when we traveled from Colombo to Novara Elia, that train was moving further and was moving through mountainous area, and these were constructed. This is what they call 9 arches bridge, and you can see that that's not only the train goes, but every morning before train comes, the tourists congregate on this bridge to take pictures. So of course we wouldn't miss it. Lots of waterfalls and streams and rivers in that area, which surprisingly they use. Sri Lanka generates 80% of its electricity with hydro plants. So they didn't build all these dams and whatever on every waterfall, but lots of rivers and waterfalls have the hydroelectric power plants there. And of course, trying to get closer to people and learn about culture, what's the best way to do it as through food. So in Ela, we attended a half-day cooking school. This was the chef, local housewife, which taught us how to prepare different curries. And the whole thing started with cracking coconut and then preparing each one. There were 7 people in that school when we attended. So each one of us got one curry dish to prepare. And at the end, you can see that it was quite elaborate dinner. So different curries, beet curry and lentil curry and chicken curry in the middle. Very, very nice experience, and taught us a lot about people and country. So from Ela, we moved to a town called Kandy. And that trip was also on train. However, the train was much more modern. The old train and government-controlled trains and buses are painted red in Sri Lanka. The private things are blue. This I mentioned that the Prime Minister Bandaranaike, a woman, that she turned into Soviet Union and China for support. After she stopped being prime minister, they kind of privatized lots of industry, and then Sri Lanka became free market economy, but Chinese influence is still very prevalent there. And these, for instance, this train line and trains were built and delivered by Chinese, okay? Traveling from place to place, we passed towns with billboards in towns saying this project is financed by China, and thank you, China, for doing that. You see Chinese influence a lot in Sri Lanka. So Kandy, that's the capital where last king was. The seat of last king of Sri Lanka. So it's second biggest city after Colombo. You can see part of the city from the kind of mountain Buddhist temple view, and plus Kandy has the one famous Buddhist temple, which is known for that they have the relic tooth of the Buddha there, and it was packed. The temple was packed, and it's lots of not only tourists but local people attend that. But since it was the last seat of the last king, it's and this is the temple, Buddhist temple, from which the view of the town was taken. So, but since this was the seat of the last king, it's still very much the cultural center of Sri Lanka. So we attended the kind of folk dances in this Kandyan Cultural Center, and there are many other things around there. From the Kandy, you can see we stayed in the center of the town, went to Sigiriya. So we getting, this is the first capital of Sri Lankan kingdom, and then it was moved to here, and then to here in probably 16th, 17th century. So we went there to Sigiriya to see ruins of the previous king's seats, and it was very interesting. The terrain became mostly flat. However, what's so special about Sigiriya that okay, before we got to Sigiriya, frankly speaking, we went on elephant safari, and this is the jeep. They call it jeep, but this is really the Indian Bajaj vehicle, which resembles jeep, and they use this, and it was nice to see these elephants. However, this is a problem in Africa. If you go to national park to see the animals, there will be 20, 50 other vehicles with you, and they communicate with each other, and when they spot animals, the first vehicle arrives, and then 5 minutes later there are 20 other vehicles. So it's it's photographic safari. It's nice to see the wild animals in the nature, but you look to the left and right or in the back, and you see this crowd of cars, which is ridiculous. So you can see the Sigiriya area, flat, mostly flat, except two big rocks in this area, and one of them was used as a location of seat of the king, and this was in 5th century AD. You can see the ruins. The other rock, and this picture was taken from this rock. It has, of course, what else? Buddhist temple. So and climb. You can climb this rock. There is a staircase, and also the sculptures carved in rock all the way along the route to the top. So it was quite interesting. So as I said, the first this kingdom was developed at the city of Anuradhapura, 200 BC, and then at 1000 AD, it was moved to Polonnaruwa, and it was for about 130 years before it was moved to Kandy. And Polonnaruwa, it's amazing site. You can go and visit, and you know, remember that this is 11th century, and just to see the objects that this is UNESCO site, which is huge, and you know, lots of different buildings, and this is, for instance, the King's Bath. These are like temples. This is a huge stupa, which is Buddhist, part always of Buddhist temple. So it was very impressive, very impressive site, and it's huge. It's I don't know, over 100 acres, which tells you about the size and what they could build in the 11th century. Okay, so this was the whole day trip. From Sigiriya, we traveled northeast to town of Trincomalee, which is on the Belle and Guy coast. And here is something that you might enjoy when you're walking in Cove Island Park, or you know, Silver Sands or Hammanasset. When we went to checked into the hotel, it was afternoon, and we went and saw the nice beach. Hotel was directly on the beach, and we said, okay, we are early risers, and we're going to walk on the beach in the morning after we get up. Well, we got up next morning, and beach was covered with plastic, driftwood, old shoes, whatever. And what we see, all these hotel employees and further along, all the guest house employees are raking the beach to make it clean, to make it possible. And we were told, okay, come after 11, because in the morning we have to clean the beach. So high tide always was bringing this trash and depositing on the beach, and it was really you know, sad picture of this with such a nice beach, nice hotel. You know, we had to, in the morning, we had to restrict ourselves to the swimming pool. Now, this area, and I'm repeating this history slide with to tell you a little bit, because it ties to this area. So after all these strictly Sinhalese policies of government, you know, the Tamils started thinking about separating themselves from rest of the Sri Lanka, and they tried to accomplish this with peaceful means. Then they became more and more militant, and in 1981, manuscripts and books and documents, which were important to Tamils, were burned. And in 1983, the Tamils created this LTTE organization, which and started fighting government of Sri Lanka, and they had success, and this coastal area they were able to control initially, not through the civil war started in 83 and ended in 2009. So for 26 years they were fighting, and Tamil separatists were ruling these areas, and of course not all the areas were under their control for the whole 26 years, but this area north and around Trincomalee stayed under their control. So what happened? They had regular schools. They built towns and villages for people. They had draft. However, as the central government started turning the screws on them, they went into the recruiting kids to their army, training them to be suicide terrorists. So sometimes during this period, they were declared even by United Nations as a terrorist organization. Of course, initially when they started their uprising, because Tamils, that's origin of this population is from India. India initially started arming them. However, in 1987, India decided that this is too much to handle for them. So in 1987, they sent their own forces to kind of separate Tamils and the Sinhalese and central government forces. That initially lasted, for a year and a half, but at the end, these Tamil fighters, LTTE, turned against the Indian forces. So Indian forces left in 1990. You may remember that Norway was very involved trying to establish peace among the central government and Tamil, and they got, in 2002, they got the agreement, and they started negotiations. The violence and armed attacks subsided for a little bit, but in 2004, you probably remember there was this huge tsunami in Indian Ocean, and Sri Lanka got
Joe, did he cut out?
Yeah, his voice cut out.
Yeah.
And it did before for a second too, and then it came back.
True.
Yeah, I didn't know if it was him or me.
Yeah, no, it's it looks like if you look at the photo, it's just something froze up on him.
Yeah. Got disconnected.
Okay. Let's give him a second. He might want to reconnect. Yeah.
Sounds like your classic insufficient broadband.
Yeah, that, a while back it happened to me. It just everything froze up, and then
Yeah. I had my internet go out the other day. Had a speed of all of about 10 to 20 megabytes.
yeah.
Well, the upload speed was 0.06 megabyte.
I was just talking about. You remember I was saying that I was having problems. Just a general with my computer taking about 2 hours to start up once a week. And what I started doing, instead of shutting the computer down, I just put it on sleep.
Yeah.
So this
Optima with their typical service said it wasn't their problem. They were going to send somebody out tonight from 5 to 8 p.m. And then all of a sudden yesterday it cleared up.
Yeah. I don't know what happened to Roman, but
I guess we should.
he hasn't come back on either, because you would have gotten invite, to let him in. So at this point, it's got 5 minutes. We'll give him another minute or so, and then
Does anybody have any questions?
yeah, I mean,
If you want more statistics, I can give it to you.
but
Yeah, we're losing people.
There were 55,000 soldiers were killed during the Civil War, according to Waikiki. And the Indians lost almost 1,300 people, the soldiers fighting during their peacekeeping operations. It's estimated that about 80,000 to 100,000 people were killed, which meant about twice as many, well, maybe half the casualties were civilians in that Civil War. Let's complete the story.
Well, doesn't look like he's getting back on.
Larry here. Just wanted to mention that as a kid, I was a stamp collector. And before it was named Sri Lanka, it was always Ceylon. And they had the most attractive postage stamps of any country.
Yeah, I remember that.
They in a place called San Marino, I remember. Those were the most attractive stamps. That goes back about 70 years.
That was
Or 65 years, whatever.
You still
Doesn't
have,
look like, it doesn't look like he's getting back on.
Yeah.
is he in the
Well-
waiting room?
Has anybody tried to call him and see?
Well, just,
Make sure you,
well, it's the meeting's over anyway, so. If anything, if you can try and see if